Ayaan Hirsi Ali was raised a devout Muslim, but she says Islam must be reformed to save it from extremists. In her early 20s, she fled to the Netherlands to escape an arranged marriage and eventually became a member of the Dutch parliament. In 2004, she faced death threats after the murder of filmmaker Theo van Gogh, who directed her short film Submission about the oppression of women under Islam. Ayaan Hirsi Ali's latest book is Heretic, and she joins me now. So glad to have you. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you, Rehan. Thank you for having me.
These attacks in Paris have really shocked the world, but I imagine they didn't come as a surprise to you because you have been sounding the alarm about this for years.
Unfortunately, that's true. It's tragic. I wish I did. I mean, I always say I wish I was wrong. But yeah, I mean, the message that there is a utopia where the world can be brought under the ban of Islam, that is something that's been spreading for decades and decades, and it's infected the hearts and minds of young people who are acting on it.
Why do you feel this way about Islam? Because you were raised a Muslim, a devout Muslim.
I was raised a devout Muslim, and initially, up to about my mid-teens, we took it for granted that we were Muslims. And then in secondary school, I mean, I was 15, 16 at that point, this narrative that it wasn't enough to be just Muslim, it wasn't enough to be pious. There had to be something else. You had to go and command right and forbid wrong and tell fellow Muslims that they should be praying and should be pious, to tell Christians to convert to Islam. What entered our neighborhood and our life was a narrative of jihad, holy war, martyrdom. The world was divided into those who believe and those who don't. Jews became our enemies, etc. And that is when 9/11 happened years later. I thought, oh my goodness, that took on hold, and it's not only of me, but if I was one of those young 19 men, and if I had gone on to believe that, I would definitely have done the same thing.
You say the opposite of what many people who come on and who are Muslims and who practice Islam, and they say Islam is a peaceful religion. Are you saying Islam is not a peaceful religion?
I'm saying there are millions of peaceful Muslims, people who want to live in peace, especially since that's the one key thing that's challenged in Muslim-majority societies. But Islam as a doctrine, as a theology, and especially in its political aspects, it is used to wage war. It's used as a tool of intolerance towards women, towards gays, towards others. And that's what I'm talking about. It is, of course, possible to turn Islam into a religion of peace, but it's not going to happen automatically. There are things that need, and I describe those 5 key points in my book, but things need to happen. Muslims need to unify around what should change within Islam. I just point out 5 of them.
Yeah, I want you to listen to this interview that I did with a Muslim family, and they lost 2 loved ones, sisters, in fact, in that Paris terror attacks. Sharif Njai, one of the brothers, made this emotional appeal. Listen.
We are among so many victims. I would tell these people and the world to understand that there's a critical difference between whatever they preach and between the peace that we are in Islam. I want to tell these people that whatever agenda they're doing, they should stop wrapping it around the blanket of Islam, because the blanket of Islam is about peace and unity and love, because that is the furthest from Islam. Because a Muslim would not kill just for the sake of killing, especially killing women or elderlies or kids.
So, Ayaan, what do you make of what he's saying? He's obviously in grief, but he is saying that, basically saying that these people are perverting Islam.
Yeah, so I acknowledge his grief. I feel his pain, but they are not perverting Islam. The people who killed his relatives are invoking the Quran. The question is, they invoke the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam. 1.6 billion people follow his example or aspire to follow his example. Did Muhammad behave in these ways that the extremists, the way they portray him? And the uncomfortable truth is, yes, he did. Can he be an example in that way? If not, what should Muslims do and say about it? What about jihad, holy war against the infidel? What about Sharia law? What about commanding right and forbidding wrong? What about investing in life after death? These are very problematic concepts within Islamic doctrine, Islamic theology, Islamic jurisprudence, history, and tradition. And it is promoted not only by crazy individuals who feel disenfranchised and marginalized in Europe, it's promoted by the key countries of, you would say the core countries of Islam, such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, Qatar. They've been pouring a lot of money into this narrative, and now we are seeing the world unfold in the way that they've been promoting it, and they're not taking responsibility, and they're not being held responsible for it.
Is this what you see? What do you see as the cause for the rise in radical Islam and these terrorist acts? Is it because of what you just said?
Well, the idea that the world can only be improved and Islam is the solution, that idea is about at least 95 years old. If I start with the Sunni Muslim Brotherhood in response to, westernization. But the idea took on hold and was spread across the world with resources, with money from oil. And I would say the key country that has pushed this is Saudi Arabia. They've established madrasas everywhere across the world, pushing this Wahhabi narrative. And Qatar joined them and other oil-rich countries. And now they're facing the backlash. They're playing the victim card. They're not taking responsibility for the fact that they actually pushed this narrative and destroyed whole societies and continue to destroy whole societies. And we need to hold them responsible for that.
You think that we could have a better strategy. You say that European leaders must do 3 things that you write about in your latest article. 3 things to start to prevent further attacks. You say learn from Israel, address the infrastructure of indoctrination, and design a new immigration policy. Does this apply to the United States as well?
I think eventually it will. 2 decades ago, when this generation that have now turned out to be jihadis, when they were not jihadis, when they were just young children, Europeans failed to educate them and immerse them in the ideas of liberty and tolerance and equality and what Europe is all about. The Islamists were penetrating their neighborhoods, telling them Western civilization is all about oppression and decadence. And they could read in newspapers and see on television Westerners also complaining about Western society, thus reinforcing that message. Now, I think in hindsight, we need to penetrate those very same neighborhoods and try and educate young citizens of free countries what freedom is all about, what tolerance is about, what equality is all about. Closing of borders. Again, 20 years ago, there was no need for that when the problem was relatively small. But now the scale of the problem is so big that you have to take these draconian measures to try and at least, bring some semblance of order into it. The United States is not where Europe is. But if the United States follows the same footsteps, multiculturalism and all this nonsense, then the United States could very quickly get there.
Let's talk about this Syrian refugee question that has been raised here in the United States. It's very different than in Europe, I would think, where there are tens of thousands of people who can cross into the border. Here, people have to undergo a screening process of up to 24 months. Does that stricter policy make any difference at all?
Again, I watch this with incredulity, and I think it is not really about where they are coming from and who they are. We know that these people, most Syrians, have been subjected to terror more than we can ever understand. And those who survive, if they're looking for help, I think we in the United States and even in Europe, we should offer that help. But it is what happens after they arrive, not before. Once Syrians come here, if we can educate them and immerse them, again, in the doctrine of freedom and what the constitution of this country is about, that's a different story. And when they're here 20 years from now, I think we're going to see people who are grateful to America and are patriotic. But if not, if we leave them in the hands of these, Islamists, we're going to see what happened in Minneapolis with people who come from the same country as I do. A lot of, Somalis in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, ended up joining Al-Shabaab in the U.S., not before they were here.
Ayaan Hirsi Ali, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is telling, and that the story is not supported by the facts. Last week he said that thousands of radical Islamic terrorists have been allowed into the United States. Think about that.
Yeah.
He said thousands of Islamic terrorists have been allowed inside the United States. people barely notice because he says so much that has to be fact-checked. We can barely keep up. But he's saying things that are flatly untrue, and they all buy into this larger storyline that the system is against the American people.
Well, that's the whole thing that
it does add up to a danger.
But that's the whole thing that you hear, and it's not just from Donald Trump. You hear it from a lot of folks, especially, I think, more so during this election. We talk about police violence, or when Dennis was just talking about, but it doesn't matter. The fact checks don't matter. I think many times people want their beliefs reinforced, and if you're on television, you're trying to point out, even sometimes calmly, like, this person is lying to you just because they're saying it loudly. It does not mean that they're actually right.
Because this is a gut election, right? This is an election in our guts. But that's why the Sean Hannitys of the world, conservative leaders, have to speak out. They can't let
Sean
Trump
Hannity tonight basically shaped Donald Trump's response, saying, "Oh, but the media didn't say." It's like,
it's a shame.
Yeah,
it's a shame. It was a missed opportunity.
Let me get Dennis in. Dennis, you say that Trump's rigged election comments are, you believe that they're terrible. So why do you think he's raising these doubts?
As I said, I think he says whatever he emotes. It's, as I said, each candidate comes with their baggage. I said to you the first night that I was on your program.
But is that acceptable to you?
I am proud.
Dennis?
I am proud as a conservative about the amount of angst that we feel about his character. But there is no corresponding angst among liberals about the character of Hillary Clinton. We care more about character than liberals do. That's what I will say.
I think there are a lot of people that are concerned about Hillary Clinton. And listen, I get your
point.
No,
about her views, not her character. You never hear it. You never hear it.
I'll take you at face value. All right, let's just say that. I'll let you have that. But then, how, considering all these remarks that we hear every single day, and so you had 50 very well-respected people who know foreign policy and security coming out yesterday, how then can one in good conscience, as a conservative, say, this is the guy for me?
Because if one believes as I do, this is the larger picture of all, if one believes as I do that the left is damaging my country perhaps irreparably, as it is doing to Western civilization in Europe as well, undermining the basic values of the society, I know that that's not how a nice, sweet person on the left wakes up in the morning. I understand that. Half of my relatives are on the left, and I love them. I understand that. But that is the damage. Look, take the university. The university has been damaged terribly. It has become a place of indoctrination and virtually no free speech versus what it was in the past.
Can I jump in here, Dennis?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Ryan, please.
Defend what the left does at the university.
You're talking about a lot of things here, but fundamentally, if you agree with me that the free and fair election is the most important thing that we're building everything else on, isn't that more important than what's going on in academia? I mean, we're talking about the basis of everything.
Well, it's not the basis of everything because I think a lot of people just dismiss what he says when he makes these hyperbolic statements. But you can't dismiss what is happening at the university where conservatives are shut down if they speak. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
So listen.
If Trump loses the election.